Hello, as always, I'm Cosmic, and it has been far too long since we've been on the path as Geralt of Rivia. But now, in CD Projekt Red's third instalment of the widely successful franchise, we return to the boots of the infamous White Wolf in what has probably been the most widely anticipated RPG of the past few years. I've now put my 90 plus hours into the game, and so it is finally time for me to make this review. Now, it's been good to be back in the boots of the white-haired Witcher alongside his two iconic swords. There was a lot of hype around this game, particularly about the type of game that CD Projekt Red was aiming to create for their third installment. Contrary to previous games, The Witcher 3 has a massive open world to explore, which is certainly a sharp departure from the second's hub-based level design. In fact, the world itself is 35 times larger than that of the second installment, which is all well and good, but we've all played plenty of games with open worlds that have a lot of space, but bugger all to do in it. Thankfully, however, the world is brimming full with locations and places to explore, and exploration itself is frequently rewarded, something that many open world games fail to do. The open world setting for the game is something that I had been very concerned about during development. The Witcher franchise has always been very narratively driven, and it was always high on dark atmosphere and gritty narrative. It was the Game of Thrones of games before we had HBO's Game of Thrones. I mean, let's not forget, of course, as well, that CD Projekt Red have a really good history of really pushing the graphical fidelity of video games. The Witcher 2 to this day looks better than most new releases. How would this narratively driven, atmospheric and graphically impressive pedigree translate into an open world? Well, actually, turns out bloody well, it would seem. Even with a large open world and the ability to just wander off in any direction, the game really loses none of its predecessor's atmosphere or its graphical impressiveness. The world is absolutely stunning with wonderful lighting, textures and scenery. The day and night cycles are fun to experience. Watching the sun go down at the harbour looks absolutely beautiful, and the weather system that has been put in place makes the world feel real and authentic. Travelling from one region to another is visibly noticeable, from Velen's dark swampy terrain to Novigrad's picturesque flower-filled fields. There is very little to complain about visually, and while there has been some so-called downgrading from the original reveals at E3 to instead essentially opt for better stability and optimization, the franchise still keeps its graphical pedigree. While there have been some issues with bugs in terms of visually and otherwise, I myself, as for example, have experienced several freezes on the inventory screen and various game crashes. However, it is still one of the most well optimized, stable releases CD Projekt Red have ever done. Accompanying great visuals is also a superb soundtrack with an epic musical score alongside some great sound effects. The voice work of the game overall is to a very high standard. I always enjoy the array of British accents that they place in the Witcher games. I'm sure the developers must just scour the British Isles, because they don't only just have Scottish, Irish, Welsh and English accents in there, but they also have regional accents in there such as Scouse, West Country and more. There were a few times where the voice acting wasn't quite right or was outright poor, such as a few instances with Ciri sounding just completely out of place or to the point of being disingenuous to what the actual events were. Geralt himself retains his grisly deep voice with his emotionless wit plain to see. What annoyed me most, however, was the change to the main narrator's voice. Instead of having the young bard Dandelion narrating the voice, which all the previous games have, you now have the old version of the Reckless Bard, which I did not enjoy, and it wasn't just because his voice became irritating. I always felt that the younger Dandelion, especially the actor who did the voice work, told narrated parts much better, much more dramatically, and it was much more engaging. It's nice to see the franchise go back to its roots, with Geralt's profession as a Witcher taking a much more prominent role in both the story and the gameplay. I always felt that The Witcher 2 used being a Witcher as a way to break up the main story rather than making it an integral woven part of the overall narrative. Bar having to do various Witcher work in the main quests and the side quests, you also have access to specific Witcher contracts that you can pick up all around the world. These contracts vary on level difficulty and each have their own monster battles and stories with them. A big addition to the game is Geralt's Witcher senses, by which you can now sense things like lootable containers. However, the main purpose of them is to find and examine clues, such as following tracks, dead bodies, even follow smells in the air. The whole mechanic fits in really well and will remind players of the Batman Arkham games of the detective mode in those games. Once you have used your keen Witcher senses to track a monster down, knowing how to kill it is the key to survival. Running in blindly, thinking your silver sword will overcome all, is a surefire way to get killed quickly. Each monster must be studied via the bestiary to learn its vulnerabilities and tactics. Preparing for fights is as important as skill in combat. Applying sword oils, drinking potions, and of course using every resource at your disposal, such as the Witcher spells known as signs, is key. Monster fights are tough in this game, there's no doubt about it. While your average necrophage will be dispatched with relative ease, Witcher contract monsters will supply an entirely different variety of difficulty. The monster variety alone in the game is staggering, with each type of monster, such as vampire or spectre, having several varieties to each. Witcher contracts will really test your skills and contain some of the toughest fights in the entire game. I myself struggled greatly at the hands of a woodland spirit who probably killed me 8 times or so before I finally was able to dispatch him. The difficulty of these fights, alongside the detective work and preparation that goes into them, really sparks those reward centres of the brain when you finally overcome your prey. You even get to keep a trophy from the monster, which will have special effects such as bonus experience for monsters or bonus experience for humans, or bonus gold, etc, as a memento of your historic moment. Combat against human, elves and dwarves can be as challenging and indeed as deadly as monsters. The combat system in the third has dramatically improved from the seconds, providing a visceral experience. Combat this time round is more than just stringing attacks together correctly. The timing of your attacks is crucial. Parrying and riposting is essential in swordplay. Your positioning is also key. Making sure to move and dodge is a must, because being flanked will get you killed. I really like the design of the combat, and I like the fact that it shifted its focus to provide a much more well-rounded and realistic experience. The changes ensure that the combat is challenging but still skill based, so you always have a fighting chance. That is, unless you're severely underleveled. Character progression in the game remains similar to that of Witcher 2, but more in depth and expanded. There are several skill trees available, and each has various abilities on there that will give you either passive abilities or active abilities, or just various statistical upgrades. One change that I think that really affects the combat for the better is the change to signs. So signs now each have their own unlockable second ability. So Igni, for example, has both a wider ranged AoE attack, and it also has a second ability which is a fixed fire stream, which basically just focuses on a single opponent. These alternate signs, and indeed the unlockable melee attacks, add a depth to the game that was previously lacking in its predecessors. And while The Witcher 2 did receive critical acclaim and it was loved by most, it still had some odd design choices in terms of mechanics. Mechanics like only being able to drink potions and perform alchemy while meditating was a source of great annoyance amongst players, and the issue has thankfully been resolved. You can now perform alchemy at any time, creating a variety of sword oils, potions and bombs, but the most important thing that you can now do is consume potions at will, even during combat. This seemingly small change changes the way you approach combat. By not hindering you in terms of the various buffs and potions, you can now just feel free to focus on the combat rather than spending an enormous amount of time meditating before each battle. However, potion toxicity is still a factor, and too many potions at once will kill Geralt dead. That said, once you have run out, you will need to meditate, as meditating out of combat will replenish your stocks. Crafting is made simple as always, and there are many different items to craft, both in terms of alchemy, weapons and armour. The crafting system makes it easy to see what ingredients you need, and collecting those ingredients is often very easy in the wide world, plus you can buy direct from the merchants too. While the crafting screens are easy to use, the inventory screens, however, are a mess and are awful to navigate, particularly if you're fond of using a game controller. It has been an issue that has stuck throughout the series and sadly remains for this instalment. Spending ages crawling through ingredients inventories is something that I don't particularly enjoy, and I can imagine that it does test a lot of people's patience. One of the major issues for the game for me was travelling. Fast travel is done by signposts and once they've been discovered, which was not a problem. Travelling by foot was also not a problem. What was a huge annoyance, however, was Roach, Geralt's trusty steed, which in the case of the game he certainly was not. Controlling the damn animal was clunky at best and outright unresponsive at times. He frequently got stuck on a tree stump, and the game had a mechanic that basically has a mechanic that if you are travelling on the road, the horse will automatically follow the path. Of course, the horse just has to be a dick and would randomly decide to miss corners, run off the road and basically just head in whatever direction he pleased. It didn't matter what I wanted him to do, he was always going to do something else. Boat travel as well is also possible, which while sailing and kind of watching the scenery go by as you're glistening along the water is very joyous. The clunky boat is pretty bad and it can have quite slow turns which do become annoying, and while it does kind of accurately reflect how a boat does handle, it still becomes annoying, especially when you're getting attacked by several drowners and sirens all at the same time. Like I mentioned before, the Witcher series has always been heavily narratively driven. The first focused on Geralt's personal storyline after his memory was lost. The second game departed from Geralt's personal story, though it was interwoven at points, but it did mainly focus on the world's political plots and machinations. The third, without giving any spoilers, is phenomenal. You get kind of a best of both, really. You get both Geralt's personal quest in the main story narrative, as well as a little bit of political intrigue too, but the side quests mainly deal with the political intrigue. Fans of the series will see the return of many loved characters as well as new ones. Particularly important for me was Yennefer of Vengerberg. As a big fan of the lore, she is a massive person in the Witcher novels, and thus it's been long awaited seeing her in the game. I hope that there will be more characters returning in upcoming DLC, as I wouldn't mind a visit from a certain Scoia'tael elf and a certain dragon. The writers have done a fantastic job with the dialogue, and it's often full of dry humour, and it kind of does maintain a good balance between action, drama and humour, and I never see it pull particularly too strong in any one direction. It keeps a good balance and overall keeps the whole game flowing very well. The quests themselves are fantastic throughout. Side quests can really complement the main narrative, while sometimes they just have their own stories and their own following quest chains. There are also random events in the world that can be caused by your actions in certain quests. Choice is once again at the forefront of narrative in the game, and the game itself offers players a lot of choices with real consequences to the world. You can partake in mini games in the world such as fist fighting or horse racing. There's also a collectible card mini game in there that I am ashamed to say I spent far too much time playing. I think one of the things I most enjoyed about the game is the way that CD Projekt Red have crafted a beautiful illusion of action and reaction in the world. The game really attempts to make the world a living, authentic, believable environment that feels alive. Quest choices can have far-reaching consequences. I myself let a trapped spirit free in a quest, which later then went on to butcher an entire village. This village was then empty for the rest of the game, and those merchants and everything that can be done in that village were gone forever. The economy system in the game is affected by your actions too, such as if you take back a fishing port from monsters, the villagers will then go back and reclaim it for theirs, and the price of food from the merchants in that area will decrease. All this reinforces the illusion of having a real world, which ends up providing actually one of the most immersive RPG experiences to date. In my opinion, CD Projekt Red have crafted one of the best role-playing games ever made. Like any other, it does have its flaws, but its quality is ultimately undeniable. Its engaging story mixed with its immersive world and challenging combat makes for an incredible experience. It's one of those games that even at 30 hours in, you feel like the game's only just starting. It's only just starting to get into its own. It's only just starting to enter its groove, so to speak. It has hours and hours and hours worth of content, and the choices in the game make for some interesting replayability. The game is a true work of art, and I cannot recommend it enough. With 16 free DLCs on the way and 2 expansions adding almost 50 hours of gameplay between them, there's plenty on the horizon for The Witcher 3, and for me personally, I just hope this will not be the final installment for the franchise. And that is my Witcher 3 review. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe and leave a comment, and I will see you next time.